What's up, guys? Welcome to the Cornerstone Gundog Academy Podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to both Josh and myself. I am excited to hop on here. I've got some notes. I've got an interesting subject that I thought would be, Josh and I thought this would be a good one for my first Cornerstone podcast, seeing as my entryway into all of this is I was owner of Southern Oak Kennels, still am, and I breed dogs. And while I am asked a lot of questions about dog training, I also field a lot of questions about dog breeding, specifically about puppies, choosing puppies, and I am often asked about picking a puppy. How do I pick the right puppy out of a litter? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, sort of how I got to where I landed on this subject, and then we'll just talk about it because I know there will be some people who disagree here, and there will be some people who are on board. And I think that the more experience you have around puppies, the more likely you are to agree with my perspective here. So when I got into Labradors, I had Springer Spaniels and enjoyed Springer Spaniels. And I was with my mentor, Mark Harefield, and he had some British Labs, and I liked a pair of them in particular. And I just said, hey, if you ever breed these two, I would like a shot at some of the pups or one of the pups or whatever works out. So I wound up having first pick female and like second or third pick male on the litter. And this litter was born, and Mark told me about them. He told me when they were going home. And one day I was at work and I got a phone call from Mark that basically just said, hey, I'm going to send some of the pups home today. And I was like, well, I haven't chosen mine. He lived an hour away. I couldn't get there. And he was like, oh, I'll get one for you. I was like, what do you mean get one for me? Like I'm first pick, I want to choose. And he was like, they're black. They're all black females. Like they look the same. And Mark has been doing this since the late 1970s. And this would have been in 2010. So I was a little frustrated, and Mark said, I'll pick one for you. I'll just grab one that looks good to me, and I'll make sure it's a female. And then you can come get it whenever. So when I picked it up, he explained to me why he focuses on choosing the right litter and doesn't care so much about picking a puppy. And I thought it was really interesting. I kind of, stored that away in the back of my brain. And then years later, when I started breeding dogs, I would help people choose their puppy. And I would often have puppies in a litter that maybe I liked a little more, or maybe I thought that one will definitely be first pick, or that one should probably be last pick. Well, over time, those same puppies started coming back to me for training. And so I got to, I remembered the puppy when it went home, and then I got to see it. And then I also kept some puppies back from litters that I was planning on training and keeping myself. And I just noticed that so much of what I predicted based on how the puppy was at 8 weeks was just not true, or just not how it panned out with the dog at, let's say, 6 months or a year or even a year and a half. And so over the course of a decade, I started really finding myself in agreement with Mark. And I think several things have happened that I want to kind of outline for you guys that would be helpful for you if you're about to get your first dog or your next dog, and you're worried about picking order or position or any of that. Because look, it is a concern. I get it all the time. I mean, I'm asked multiple times a week, what pick am I? How can I get on a litter that's where I'm going to be first pick? I don't want to be last pick, those sorts of questions. And so as a breeder, whether it's me or anyone else out there, if you're considering getting a working gun dog from a breeder, if the breeder does his or her job correctly, then there should be no problem taking last pick. Now, granted, every once in a while you'll have like a runt, which is decently rare for us, or you'll have an unhealthy dog. That's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a healthy litter where everyone is within a decent spot on the bell curve of size, and the litter has all been raised together properly. In that case, not only do I not have any qualms with being last pick, I will often just take whatever puppy's left over if I'm keeping one. I'll let everybody choose, and whatever's left, that's the one I keep. I just did that, actually. Just did that a few weeks ago. I have a 12-week-old pup. So let me go through a few things that I see and then kind of my thoughts. Number one, there are some things about the litter that I would be looking for, and that is, are they all healthy? Are they robust, healthy pups? Number two, are they somewhat bold? Now, meeting new people and doing new things, when you take a puppy away from his or her litter mates, that can be a scary deal. And so seeing a little bit of anxiety or fear in the first 24 hours, that's kind of normal, but maybe the breeder sent you a couple videos of them roughhousing or playing or playing with the breeder's children or wife or husband or whoever. Those are good signs just to see, hey, these are healthy pups. They're moving around well. They're not scared of their own shadow, because you do want to have a litter that has been well socialized. That's very important. Are they healthy? Are they bold or somewhat socialized? That's super important. And that all goes back to early nutrition. Are they well cared for? And honestly, when you're evaluating what breeder to pick a dog from, you want to make sure that they're raising healthy pups. Beyond those two things, though, everything else I evaluate is going to have to do with the parents and the breeder themselves. Or let's just say a track record from the breeder. So I get people come in here, and we'll just share a couple stories. So we've sold a lot of dogs to people who want to train, obviously for duck hunting, but we've also sold dogs for people who want avalanche search and rescue, live search and rescue, cadaver dogs, bomb search dogs, diabetic alert dogs. And we've even had our studs used with a friend of ours named Rachel, who's a highly intelligent breeder, very good breeder. She only breeds about a litter every year or every other year for service dog work. A lot of the dogs I just mentioned, when those dogs are chosen out of a litter, the purchasers or owners, they will go through an extensive amount of puppy testing. So we've had them come and do more than 2 hours of work with the litter. And we've had people show up with a mentor and a duffel bag full of stuff and spend forever doing what are better known as puppy aptitude tests. Lots of variations. And I've always just kind of rolled my eyes at it, because I'm like, look, I see these puppies every day. I think this is a ginormous waste of time. I think you should look at the parents and then just snag a puppy. And, you'll have people say, I want the smallest dog. So they pick a small one out of the litter. I get that. However, you should really just be looking at the parents and say, the puppies are probably going to wind up somewhere similarly sized to these parents. Now, there can be exceptions to that for sure. But in general, they're going to inherit size from parents and grandparents. So when you look at a litter and you say, this is the smallest one, what I likely know as, that's the puppy that's just the least interested in competing for food. And so when you take it home and it doesn't have any competition for food, it's eating on its own, it's going to grow. And likely, in so many instances, it's going to grow bigger than its siblings. It just happens. Or you say, I want the big one. I want the big blocky one. Well, that's probably the one that's very competitive for the food. And that's fine. They're going to be a little bigger at go home. That does not mean at all that they're going to be bigger when they're full mature size, 2-3 years. And then you have folks say, well, this last weekend, there were a couple puppies that when they got moved from one of our locations to my place, they were like a little nervous because it was a new place and they didn't love it the first day. And a guy was like, I don't know if I like this one. He seems a little timid. So I got it. I understood. I said, cool, no problem. Get the other one. Well, I kept the little timid one, and she's at my house right now, and 24 hours to just settle into a new location, and she is amazing. I'm talking scared of nothing, just tackling my Springer Spaniels, trying to run up my wooden stairs, just absolutely bold puppy. But you wouldn't know that if you just spent an hour with her on her first day here. And so all that to say, there aren't a lot of things that you can tell at 8 weeks. That's when we send our puppies home. If your breeder sends your puppies home at 7 weeks, then even less you can tell. If your breeder is sending puppies home before 7 weeks, then I would question ethically that decision. So for us, then, what do you need to do? Well, you need to look at the parents. You need to look at the parents and talk to the breeder about what you're looking for in a dog. So I saved a couple of stats just to back me up, because I realize that opinion is largely based on my experience over the last 15 years, and someone else could have different experiences. However, Rachel, my friend who breeds for service dog work, she actually sent me several articles, and I don't have time to get into them, but I'll try my best to link them with this podcast. Several articles essentially correcting her and supporting my opinion on the puppy aptitude test over the last several years. And all the articles were related to multiple studies done on a few different working breeds, including German Shepherds, where they evaluated and did puppy aptitude tests at 7 or 8 weeks. And then they waited until the dogs were a year and then 18 months. And they reevaluated all the dogs. And they essentially, across the board, found that there are very few behavioral indicators that can be determined to be hereditary or genetic that are determinable at 8 weeks. So the things you see at 8 weeks, you're not likely going to see, or you're just as likely to see or not see. Let's put it that way, 50-50. I'll read a little bit from the study here from the Institute of Canine Biology. The heritability for most behavioral traits is rather low. This doesn't mean that genetics isn't important for behavior, but that our ability to infer the genetics of an animal from observations of behavior is limited, because environmental factors produce so much variability that the fraction of total variation that can be attributed to genes is small. The problem with low heritability of behavioral traits in dogs is that behavior is usually evaluated very carefully when making breeding decisions, and the evaluator usually feels that they're making a useful assessment, yet all the studies and mounds of data generated over the last 50 years indicate that these assessments are very poor predictors of genetic breeding value of the dog, as you will see. I'll link this study. It's fascinating to read. Before I get on to the next part, I want to explain that. So, yes, there is a genetic component of behavior, but it's very mixed from parents. And so let me put it to you this way. If you have a stud dog whose drive is a 10, and you have a mama dog, a dam, whose drive is a 1, people will make a decision and say, I'm going to breed those so we can have a bunch of dogs whose drives are a 5. It just doesn't work that way. You might have some 10s, you might have some 1s, you might have some 7s or some 4s, you might have some 13s, right? It's not a good indicator. In general, you want to breed dogs who exhibit behaviors that you like. You don't want to try to breed things out. You don't want to try to breed things in. Now, what does that mean about looking at puppies and deciding which puppy to choose at 8 weeks? So a little later in the paper, in the article, it said the 2 papers noted above, which I'll link those, are worth reading. The first one convincingly showed that evaluation of puppies were of little use in predicting behavior as an adult. The evaluation of 630 German Shepherds at 8 weeks and again at 450 to 600 days, roughly 1.5 to 2 years old, they found that heritability of some of the behavioral traits they looked at was modest. So selection for those traits would result in some improvement, but the correspondence of puppy test results to performance at adult age was negligible, and the puppy tests were therefore found not to be useful in predicting adult suitability for service dog work. So they did find that there are some behavioral indicators in the parents that have a modest level of transferring over into the puppies. That's important. Workability, trainability, drive, bidability, all those things. But the results of the aptitude test, as far as determining adult behavior characteristics, were, as they said, negligible. Keeps going. The second study is recent, so the information is up to date, and it does a good job of recognizing the potential pitfalls of studying puppies to predict adult behavior. But again, they found little correspondence between individuals' behavior in the neonate, puppy, and adult tests. So what that means is they do a early test, they do a puppy test, and then they do an adult test, and they found very little correspondence between the results of the three tests. Exploring activity was the only behavior that was significantly correlated between the puppy and adult tests. So the dog's desire to explore. We conclude that the predictive validity of early tests for predicting specific behavioral traits in pet dogs is limited. An especially interesting outcome, I thought this was fascinating, in this study is the evaluation of fearfulness. Remember the puppy I mentioned that stayed an extra day and really woke up, which is the most common fearfulness, which is the most common behavioral reason for a puppy to be rejected from a guide dog program. They found in evaluating fearfulness, some major changes were observed over time, with the initially most fearful individuals becoming the most friendly to people or vice versa. That statement should give you pause. Could eliminating a puppy from a breeding program because of fearfulness be culling out the dogs that would have the best temperaments as adults? All that to say, there's not a lot you can tell at 8 weeks. There's several studies out now that just show the correlation between a behavior being present at 8 weeks and being present at adult age. It's rare or negligible, 50-50 chance. Could still be there, could not. The correlation between heritable traits, behavioral heritable traits, and the puppies showing those traits, it actually is modest. There is some of that. So, of course, that's going to be the case. If you breed a line of dogs, you're going to get, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So I mentioned earlier, don't worry about picking the puppy. If you're on a yellow litter and you have a fox red and a light color breeding mix, it might be nice to be first pick, because if you really want a fox red dog, that's going to be your best chance to pick one out, right? So yeah, shade of color with the yellow breedings, that or if you have a breeding that's going to be mixed and you're going to have black and yellow pups and you really want a black puppy, it might be nice to be high up on the picking order just to make sure you get a shot at that puppy. But when it comes to, I want to choose because I think first choice is going to be the most bad to the bone dog out of the litter, ain't happening. I can't tell you how many great dogs there are out there who were the last pick. I owned one, Apache Joe, phenomenal dog, really put my kennel on the map, leftover pup. So what should you be looking for then? As I said, a good breeder and good parents. What do I mean, though, by good parents? Because we say this a lot, and you'll hear people say, well, I bought a dog and, she's got papers. Or I bought a dog and he's got a great pedigree. You need to go a little deeper than that. What do you mean by great pedigree? Of course, there are some obvious ones here. The parents need to be health tested. If we're talking about Labradors, hips, elbows, eyes, and then the genetic markers for several diseases that can be inherited, passed on from parents to puppy. You want to make sure that at least one of the parents is clear of those genetic markers so that your puppy will not be affected by diseases such as EIC, CNM, PRA, ST2, which is dwarfism, and Stargardt disease, several of them. Anyway, you want to make sure that that's should be done no matter what. If the health tests aren't done, it's a backyard breeding, stay away from it. On to the pedigree, though. You say, well, my dog comes from a really good pedigree. Okay. What you usually mean, or what people usually mean when they say that, is in the pedigree, there are titles attached to the dog. So just think about it. If it were people and you were having a child and the husband had a PhD in biology and the wife had a PhD in microphysics or whatever, you would probably just assume these are likely going to be some smart kids. Well, that would be different than if the dad was Peyton Manning and the mom was like an international well-known tennis player. You would say these are going to be some athletic kids. Again, good pedigree. It's got some titles next to it, but PhD and Super Bowl champ, very different. So I'll have people who have a dog who comes from, let's say, show lines or field bench bred lines, and they'll have a CH next to a bunch of the names, champion. Well, that's a show ring champion, And not that those are bad dogs. They just haven't had to demonstrate much or any working ability to get those titles. Or you'll have somebody buy a dog and say, this is from field champion lines, and it'll be American champion lines, FC, NFC, AFC next to the name. Great. Those dogs are going to have some characteristics that are likely helpful if you want to run field trials, and could be helpful if you want a duck hunting dog, but could be a bit much. Or you'll have people that say, I want a British lab, right? That's what I breed. How do you know it's a British lab? There are a lot of British labs in the UK that are in the USA that were born here. They were born in the USA. What makes them British? Why are they any different from an American lab if they were born in Mississippi or Michigan? Well, the titles and the pedigree were achieved in the United Kingdom or in Ireland. So those particular hunt test or working tests or field trial titles, whether it's American titles, British titles, AKC, HRC, they all tell you something a little different. And so when you're choosing what is the best puppy for the Jones family, what you really need to do is get yourself familiar with the type of dog that you want. Write down a list of characteristics that you want in a dog, and then go figure out what's the best way to evaluate dogs on that list of characteristics. And based on that answer, go find some parents who have accomplished things, grandparents or great-grandparents, a whole pedigree of dogs who have accomplished things within the characteristics of evaluation, the scope of evaluation that you're hopeful for. And that is your best chance at finding a puppy that's suitable for your needs. Not walking in and spending 30 minutes thinking that you're going to pick the rock star. Not saying, well, yeah, the parents are papered and titled and having no idea what type of title it is, but having an understanding of the pedigree. I'm not meaning you have to go learn all the names. I'm a pedigree nerd. I love deep dives into them. It's super fun for me, but for most people, that's just not going to happen, and it shouldn't have to. But you can at least speak to your breeder and say, hey, the dogs in your pedigrees, what do they have to do? What type of things are they evaluated on? Can I either see the parents or see a video of the parents or talk to some people who have seen the parents? Get a few references, get yourself in a comfortable position on the litter, and then on puppy day or whenever they send you a puppy or however that works with your kennel, snag one, take off. We'll do some more podcasts on the next subject, but what you do from that day onward, and this is one of the reasons that Cornerstone Gundog Academy exists, is of utmost importance to you having the type of dog that you dreamed of having. If you go by first pick from the best litter of characteristics ever, and you go home and you don't raise it right and you don't train it right, you're never going to have what you hoped for. But if you're fifth pick female on a litter of great dogs from good pedigree, and you go home and you do everything right, you have a real solid shot at developing the type of dog that you wanted to have all along. So anyway, that's my thought on picking puppies versus picking a litter. And I look forward to hopping back on here with you guys soon and tackling some more subjects. Thanks again for listening.